It's hard to find the right words to describe Trek to Yomi. By far, it is one of the most divisive samurai game releases that has come about in recent years. And while many are praising it for the terrific qualities it does have to offer, there is also a very big area in which this game falls flat, which reviews have been pointing out as well. We'll get into all that in just a bit. First, I just want to explain a bit more about the game for those of you who maybe don't know a lot about it. It feels like this game sort of just flew in under the radar. Indeed, even I had to be reminded that it had come out. Trek to Yomi is an extremely stylistic adventure in old Japan. It is sort of a side-scroller, but is one that involves fixed camera perspectives as well, so I hesitate to call it a true side-scroller. It's not a long game by any means, really only encompassing 7 levels. I was able to finish it in just around 4 hours overall. Because of that reason alone, I think it does justify its price point, costing just around $20 here in the US. But besides that, I think this game is sort of a breath of fresh air in what it is trying to achieve. Not necessarily in its actual execution, but in terms of creating a new and unique samurai game. I would love to see more experiments like this. Samurai games are weird. Plenty made in Japan end up being very anime inspired, not that that's always a bad thing, while others made in the West usually use a lot of over-romanticized samurai tropes. Neither path is necessarily wrong, as both can be done well. I think the Samurai Warriors series, although heavily anime inspired, is a great caricature of the Sengoku period, while Ghost of Tsushima, although historically inaccurate and filled with false tropes, is still an amazing experience. But really, it can be hard to try and find a true middle line that looks to tell a more realistic and grounded samurai story. And although Trek to Yomi starts out like that, it very quickly turns into a wild fantasy. In the game, you play as a samurai named Hiroki, who is tasked with defending a small town and the woman he loves. Unfortunately, things get rough when a large and menacing band of marauding raiders wreak havoc on the town, both in Hiroki's youth and later when he is an adult. What is interesting is that from looking online, the game is apparently supposed to be set during the peaceful Edo period. But the whole idea of bandit raids was much more common during the lawless times of Japan's Warring States period, known as the Sengoku Jidai. It is an odd choice when so much of the raids appear to be visually inspired by films like Seven Samurai, a film that too takes place during the Sengoku period. Of course, things spiral out of control, and Hiroki ends up embarking on a great journey through the depths of hell, or Yomi, the Shinto land of the dead, to get back what was taken from him. And this ultimately leads to him, or you the player, having to make a number of key decisions that will impact how your story ends. Because yes, there are multiple endings depending on what you choose to do. Now, before I get into this game's major flaw, I want to first talk about what I really love about it. As you can see, its visual style is heavily meant to represent classic samurai cinema of the 1950s and 60s. I've seen plenty of articles and reviews talking about how this game pays homage to plenty of old samurai films. But personally, I think it depends what they mean when they say paying homage. In terms of the story itself and decisions, I don't see it being reminiscent of anything from classic samurai cinema. Instead, it is very clearly made from a Western perspective, touting lines about Bushido, honor and duty in ways that aren't really there in classic samurai films. Needless to say, the over-romanticization of many popular samurai tropes we think about here in the West are not usually present at all in real samurai films. But with that said, in terms of the visuals alone, you have to commend it. The locations, camera angles, and even loading screens are all beautifully done and really help to bring you into the vibe that the developers are probably going for. I mean, look at some of these shots. This game, in my opinion, does a better job of the feel of classic black and white film than Ghost of Tsushima with its Kurosawa mode. This is what I believe feels the most like paying homage to classic samurai cinema. It nails the graininess, haziness, brightness, and contrast in spectacular form, along with other cool Easter eggs like the town banner being very similar to the banner from Seven Samurai. Additionally, the sound design is outstanding as well, making towns sound lively, violence and horror sound traumatic, and Yomi itself sound ghostly and ominous. The soundtrack too is great, bringing forth a lot of well-composed ambient tracks that really help fully explore the atmosphere of the world, more so than if it would have been simply made up of epic orchestral pieces. Lastly, I just want to give a shout out to the game for being fully voiced in Japanese with English subtitles. This is something that always helps immerse me way more into samurai games, and I personally feel should be the standard. I am glad that this is the go-to in Trek to Yomi, even when there is a place in the settings to toggle optional English voice actors if you want. So far I have talked about how aesthetically the game is phenomenal, with beautiful samurai cinema effects, terrific sound design, and an amazing soundtrack. So what gives? What is the issue with this game, and why is the feedback it is getting so mixed? Well, if you have looked at some of the other reviews here on YouTube, and especially if you have looked at the user reviews on Steam, there is a major issue. This game's combat is bad. It is extremely difficult to get a grip on. Not difficult in a Elden Ring, Dark Souls sort of way, difficult in a this doesn't seem like the developers completed it sort of way. Most of the combat revolves around parrying and blocking attacks and then attacking back. It is extremely repetitive, and the slim number of enemy unit types you encounter doesn't help that either. But on top of that, even this core repetitive system is somewhat of a mess. A lot of times there is not a good visual indicator when to block or parry, which means that you end up taking a lot more damage than you really should, as your parry timing can randomly miss and your block can be broken through without knowing why or how. The combat mechanics just feel like they are actively working against you. There is even occasionally issues with your character when he is trying to turn around, making him repeatedly spin while he is getting hit non-stop. Additionally, there are some armored enemies that take forever to kill, and you really don't have any idea as to how many times you have to hit them because they don't have health bars. Seriously, just look at how many times I have to hit this guy before he dies. And keep in mind that you end up facing like 15 of them in some levels. Over and over. It's just boring and kills your enjoyment. The game of course introduces various ways to deal with different types of enemies. These include ranged weapons like throwing knives, bow and arrows, and of course the massive Ozutsu gun. These probably work the best to dispatch enemies with ease. What doesn't seem like it matters much is the actual combo system. There are all sorts of different combo patterns you learn throughout the game, and I guess on paper they are supposed to be a big help. But in reality, they really don't come into use, as you frantically hack at each enemy hoping to kill them before the game starts cheating you with its broken mechanics. This makes each level turn into the biggest drag, as I dreaded each new encounter with enemies. The game essentially killed my enjoyment through its own undercooked combat system. This made it seriously hard for me to want to play the game at all, as I kept putting it off more and more. I was just not having fun with it. Maybe someone who really enjoys tedious challenges and doesn't get frustrated by poorly developed mechanics could really enjoy the combat, but sadly, that's not me, and it appears not many others. However, by the time I hit the 5th level, I finally decided to go into the options and lower the difficulty down to easy, and it made a world of difference. I was able to breeze through the remainder of the game and simply enjoy the stunning scenery and design. At that point, the game became more of an experience, as I was able to enjoy my journey through the twisted realm of Yomi. And this is where I think the game can truly find its stride, because it's sure as hell not with its combat. Trek to Yomi is solid when it is simply being a story-driven adventure through its 7 well-crafted levels. And for anyone who does pick this game up, I cannot stress enough that you should really play it on easy first, just so you don't have to deal with the game's biggest flaw. The final thing I want to talk about is in terms of replay value. Quite honestly, before I switched the difficulty, I was pretty set on the idea that I never wanted to touch this game again after I finished it. I just didn't care and I wanted it to end. But once I dropped the difficulty and made it easy to hack and slash through the remainder of the levels and therefore enjoy my experience, I actually think there could be some real potential for replaying it, largely because of the multiple endings you can achieve. I could see it being fun to try and see them all. On top of that, if finding in-game collectibles is your sort of thing, there is a lot to get in that regard too, for the die-hard completionists out there. So, with all that said, what rating would I give Trek to Yomi? I am sure if you are on the Discord server, you may have seen my ranting about this game from time to time, and you may already expect my rating of it to be low. I was actually ready to give this game a 5 out of 10. That is until I changed the difficulty and was able to enjoy it more. So after doing that and coming to a new understanding of how to best enjoy the game, at least in terms of my own personal preference, I think it is only fair that I bump it up to a 6 out of 10. To summarize, although aesthetically, Trek to Yomi is brilliant, its story falls into the realm of being a bit cliché, despite the fact that you are allowed to choose your path at the end. What drags it down the most, of course, is its poorly implemented combat system, which makes each enemy encounter more of a chore and sucks almost all the enjoyment out of the game if you are on any difficulty higher than easy. Personally, only by lowering the difficulty to breeze through the fighting was I able to really enjoy the game for what it is. So once again, at the end here, is it a game I would recommend? At its current price point of $20, I would say absolutely. If you are a fan of samurai history, samurai games, or samurai films, I think you'd like it. But just know what you are getting into from the start. I have yet to meet someone who says they actually really love the combat, so if you are someone who does, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what other people's experiences have been with the game. And with that said, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most interesting.